Okay, so hello everyone. I recorded this episode once, 7 minutes into it, but it wasn't recorded. So that's fine, it happens. Anyways, I'll restart the episode. What is the title? What can a body do with a soul? And in the subtitle, I've written abilities of creation. In this episode, my interest was to wonder and to in some sense fascinate myself with what sort of ability that we as a species have in a world. This episode, because I'm bringing up the idea of the soul, I will focus mainly on a theological landscape context to reality. And I will explain everything, but I will try to move through the hallways of a sort of, you know, religious insight. So, what can a body do with a soul? This is a very important question, because the idea is that what is the soul? And so we find ourselves in a cause and effect reality. We find ourselves in a world where there is a creator position and there is a creation position. That means even if you're someone who doesn't believe in God, right, you believe in cause and effect, right? So that means the causal position is in some sense, due to the infinite regress fallacy, a necessary existent. It's the idea that what pushed the first domino. Okay, and the answer is that if there was something that had pushed the first domino, it must have had something contingent to it before that pushed it, right? So mankind reaches a certain point where the definition of existence, the definition of causality, the definition of being creatures under a system, all of these are changing now. So right now there's 8 billion people on the planet. Out of this 8 billion people, I think it's around like 2 billion people are religious. And when you look at the idea of a religious person, an incredible quote I have heard from Swami Krishnananda, he says religion is God remembering himself. What does that mean? Religion is God remembering himself. Mankind finds himself in the creation position. We open our eyes on a rock in the middle of nowhere. It's very easy and common sense to realize that the species had no idea where it was, what it was, and its first prototype of a strategy to reality was the storification of it, right? Human beings think that, even I have even talked in certain lectures about the subjective evolution and a consideration that this creature, the moment it became aware of itself, anyways, to continue. Pretty much my attention has gone to the causal responsibility of the species, of itself, the species and the world, and the causal responsibility. Sorry, not the causal, the effectual responsibility. So what it is that we are starting things, we get to experience how they unravel, and we are also privileged to experience how we end. If you think of life as a place that you want to be immortal in, it doesn't make sense, and that context will scare you a little. But if you think of life as a place that you are here to see ability, you are here to see power, but you're not here to have power. It's a quality check of power, not an attainment of power. Okay, and let me tell you why. For many people who are drawn to religion, it starts off with the idea that this world has a designer. For example, let's say we drop a phone in a mountain, thousands of years go by, this phone freezes in the ice, and thousands of years later, people discover this phone in the ice, right? And why don't the people then be like, yo, this was formed by the mountain made an iPhone, right? Why won't people say that? Because they see the peculiarity, the specificity of its design, of its geometry. You know what it is? This year I managed to get rid of my fear of death. Just in general, my general fear of death, simply because I realized the system is designed that way. Okay, and because it's designed that way, it's like we're on a roller coaster and we're fearing the end of the ride. Makes no sense, right? So I decided that, all right, if the angel of death will come to me to take me, I will go to the angel of death, right? And not the idea that I will die, but I will walk towards the truth that is present in this world, and I will see what happens. Why? Because I am telling you, dear human being, you can play any social game, cultural game, psychological game, but you're gonna at some point be like, why am I here? And then you're gonna notice the world. The world is the clue of its origin. Okay? And so when you look at the world, it's not that, like, for example, godlike spheres, that's the name of a book I'm writing. You know, guys, I have this podcast called the Inner Realms Podcast. I messaged, this gentleman named Dr. Gabor Mate, and their team. They didn't care, guys. They didn't care for my email. Anyways, back to this. So what is the idea here, all right? So the idea is, I'm a human being. 1 in 8 billion human beings. I find myself in this world. The world is working in ways where in this 31 years of life, I have developed, I've cultivated familiarity to, I have cultivated patterns. But it is also the case that it is mysterious beyond the human position, right? So the idea is that human beings, this is what they don't tell children in the educational system. They don't tell you that if you were to actually pursue the path of knowledge, you would realize the most current and the newest known systems. And then these known systems sorry guys, I distracted myself. This is what happens when you try to, give a podcast near Starbucks. Anyways. Okay, here, let me bring the notepad. Okay. Okay, damn, it's not working. Okay, whatever. I don't know, guys. Honestly, I just had a fascination with human ability. I was wondering about it. I was wondering about the religious context. I was wondering about that human beings have understood and they have learned about the abilities of that which is outside of them. For example, the ability of, like, for example, a car engine outside of you, or somebody may know the ability and power of God based on a revelatory text, right? But we don't know the ability of the created, okay? And that's something where we're figuring out every day. That means if you were to entertain the religious idea, let's say there was a God that created everything and God is watching its creation. God is, in some sense, he's like an inventor, has built 8 billion inventions and is watching those inventions through a program that is built into each of the inventions, which it calls a soul, okay, or a collective mind, or whatever you like to call, right? So the idea is that we have a sense of the ability and the greatness that is attributed to a creator archetype. But if we were to look at the greatness and ability attributed to the creation archetype, this is where the interesting sentence, man is made in the image of God, is found. Okay? If someone was to ask me, Mr. Within, what's the difference between how the ancient traditional spiritualism would say old soul and young soul?
Psychologists have discovered that procrastination isn't caused by laziness or lack of motivation, but instead it's your
Okay. Oh, man. Ah. So if we look at the image of the creation being the reflection of the image of the creator, you know, it's like a being that has the potential of the absolute, but doesn't realize it. What can a body do with a soul? One immediate ability is the ability to recognize shape, form, and space. So an ability, what a body can do with a soul is notice that it's a body, it can notice it's a shape, it can also replicate itself in the future before actually moving. It can also in some sense be super still and receive ridiculous amount of signals. We human beings have not understood how to be properly human, and this has been our error, you know, and we have missed out on the type of humanity we could have been. You know, and sometimes I feel the future generations will laugh at what was in front of us, but we never looked at. Here, let me look up something. Okay, the 99 names of God. I'm gonna read these for the viewers, okay? And I said it at the beginning of this episode. I'm diving into theology a little. So, but I think this is important because human beings are trying to connect to God, but they cannot conceive of God. So meaning that the human being cannot connect to God. It's kind of like one of those situations when the student is ready, the master appears. So anyways, these are the names and attributes given to God in the Islamic tradition. And I speak very respectful to all conscious initiatives occurring on this planet. Whether chaotic or ordered, it doesn't matter. The fact that we're all existing together, whether you're religious or secular, it doesn't matter. The fact, if you're religious, the fact that we're God's creation is not alone. We're all God's creation. Even your enemy is God's creation. Even your friends are God's creation, you know, from a religious view. Right? So this was the bizarre thing where I was like, how are religions fighting with each other? Are they forgetting that everything is God's creation? You know, it's like, is it that easily? Like in religious books, it says only God knows what's in your heart. But people are like, yo, this guy's blasphemy. I disliked what this guy said. You know, or blasphemy. I dislike this guy's tone of voice. But anyways, for the human being, right? For me, the thing is the idea of God surpasses human culture. Because it surpasses human culture had to find a way to create a language for it, right? Language was really, like, if you think about it, if somebody says, yo, were there prophets before there was language? And you'd kind of see it'd be hard for there to be a conscious individual without language acknowledging itself as something else. Language is really what is giving us an ability to be something else while we're being something. Okay, this is the power of when I say the linguistic simulation, it means you're not just a physical existential creature, you're also a psychological abstract verb. You are an unknown movement. That's the bizarre thing, right? You know, consciousness is so mysterious. We can figure out why we're conscious of certain things, but we can't figure out why we're unconscious of other things. That's the bizarrity of it. So anyways, as someone interested in using a theological lens, just like somebody would look through a microscope, right? And I'm like a philosopher looking through a philosophical lens, a theological lens, right? A religious lens, and I'm looking at the creature, the individual. So I've put, like, instead of the microscope, it's like a theological lens, and through the theological lens, I am looking at the creation, the archetype of creation. So as a clue, I'm kind of doing some kind of, like, I guess, playful poetic detectiveness here, right? But the idea is that the creation imbues the qualities of the creator. Now check this out. I'm going to read the 99 names attributed to the ultimate inconceivable original source of, the inconceivable source of being. So it says here, Ar-Rahman, the beneficent, he who wills goodness and mercy for all his creatures. Guys, take this in. It's when you have God, you have the King of Kings. You have the ultimate authority. Imagine back in the day, a peasant going in front of a king, right? In front of a king, like in the palace, in front of the throne and all that. And now imagine, right? The totality of existence is the throne room, okay? Of that which has created everything. The king created his kingdom from scratch, poetically. Or from himself. So, Ar-Rahman, the beneficent, Ar-Rahim, the merciful. he who acts with extreme kindness. That means the human being wasn't like, oh my God, the creator of the totality of the world simulation of existence is not just beneficent, it is also merciful. That means not only does the creator of the world want the best for its world, it also forgives the mistakes, because the artist is trying to create a perfect artwork, or the artwork is perfect before it was even the artist picked up the brush, right? Al-Malik, this is the third name, the eternal Lord, the sovereign Lord, the one with the complete dominion, the one whose dominion is clear from imperfect. It's clear from imperfection. It just says 3 dots here. I don't know what it means here. Clear from imperfection. Yeah, there we go. So the eternal Lord, do you understand? It like there is something in traditional mystical traditions, okay, where impurity would evoke the demonic, okay, and purity would evoke the angelic. And if you were neither pure or impure, I guess you were just an average Joe. You know, you were somewhere there in the middle. You were truly human. You know, most human beings are not satisfied with being human. This is why the excitement of their innerbound desires are in some sense dehumanizes them. You know, you might find this fascinating, but even though there are 8 billion existing human bodies on the earth, it doesn't mean that all those 8 billion looking human beings are actually experiencing themselves as human. Not a lot of people have that. It's something you have to train, and it's called concentration. Concentration is the biggest key. If somebody's like, Mr.Within, how did you achieve anything you achieve? I'm like, I looked at something too long, man. You know, but I looked at it so long that the context of it changed. Most people look at something, they see a concept, and they're like, okay, I'm fine with that, let's move on, right? But for me, when I look at a concept, I'm like, how is this being a concept in front of me? How is this expression true in accordance to how my eyes have been familiar with the context of reality so far? You're not just being a physical conceptual entity, you're also being a non-physical collective contextual entity. So what it means is you are individual, but how you're being individual is not individual. So if you see beyond your individualism, you realize you're not an individual. If you realize you're not an individual, you might become disinterested in being a human being. You know, for a long time, I was like, why was religion like, you know, looking at spiritual people and being like blasphemy, or like STFU, you know, don't talk, you know, a spiritual person, you know, when the religious book is here, right? And I was like, yo, what kind of world has God created that mankind has to correct it? Do you understand? Do you understand what I'm telling you? That means the effort of human beings wanting to save the souls of other human beings is divine imposition. This is why it's kind of like Galileo hilariously says, you cannot teach anyone anything, you can only make him realize it within yourself. What that means is, it's like how Rumi says, when I was younger, I wanted to change the world. When I'm older, I realize I change myself. Why? Because the world is arising from yourself. You are what's holding this world on its shoulders. And you might think you have really jacked shoulders. Anyways, to continue. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, guys. My background's from Iran, so I don't know how to pronounce Arabic properly. But here it says Al-Quds, the most sacred, the one who is pure from any imperfection and clear from children and adversaries. I don't know what that means. The one who is pure from any imperfection and clear from children and adversaries. Oh, that means, I think attachments. I think that's what it could imply. I'm not sure here. Maybe a theologian can help me out here. But the idea, the most sacred, the most pure. Do you understand what purity means? Purity means truth. That means if somebody says, yo man, do you want the water where I've sprinkled dirt in it, you know, or I've sprinkled salt and pepper in it, or do you want pure water, you know? Like a water where I haven't like put dirt or something in it, right? Like salt and pepper in it. You'll realize you want the pure. Why? Because that's the definition. When mankind in his mind has a definition, the greatest, the most sacred. Do you understand? That's saying like truth, sacredness is another term for truth's presence. Anytime truth is present, sacredness is there. It becomes a sacred moment, right? For example, Batman punching Joker and saving 1 million lives, that's a sacred moment. You might not think of it. You might be like, yo, nobody's praying in that moment, but it's a sacred moment because this world is in some sense, how can I tell you, the creator, if there is the consideration of a creator, the creator created the creation for an intent. Do you understand? There was a scene in Rick and Morty where Morty has this science project and Rick suddenly makes this robot that like passes the butter and makes this sentient robot, okay? That passes the butter. Right? And the robot becomes conscious and comes to Rick and says, what is my purpose? And Rick says, you pass butter, right? And the robot says, it passes the butter and says, what is my purpose? As if, what's my next purpose, right? And then he says, in some sense, you just pass butter, right? And then the robot goes, oh, like gets sad. And Rick says, welcome to the club. Did you hear what that Rick said? Rick is proving God in that show. Do you understand? That means Rick knows God exists, but he doesn't say it. Do you know? That's the insane thing about that show, right? But that show is incredibly insane. There's so many things. I mean, like we can't kind of like, you know, like a blacksmith straight in fiction and compare fiction to a sort of anyways, abilities come when you realize it's not a self living in a world, it's also the world living in a self. Your inner life is not your ability, it's the universe's ability in you. Your outer life is your ability in the universe. Behind my eyes, I am not this body. And if somebody says, Mr. Within, are you something else? You know, I'll be like, no, man. That's the point. It's an unknown witnessing viewer that is watching the dualism of the moment. The only way we could have noticed duality was to be beyond duality. Wake up, dear species. You're caught not in a simulation. You're not caught in a simulation beyond your choice. You are caught in a simulation of your choice. That's the difference. You see, free will is hilariously the solution to all problems, but also the origin of all problems as well. Because who has the problem that's trying to find a solution? You see what I'm saying? So let's continue with these names of God. As-Salam, the embodiment of peace, the one who is free from every imperfection. And guys, you know, even though religions have had a savage history, that was due to the savage nature of man's mind having not been exposed to the civility we have now. Okay? So, this is something interesting I've noticed in religious cultures, right? Right? So, for example, there's we have in Islam, Salam Alaikum, which means peace. And at the same time, we have in some sense, like in Judaism, shalom, which means also peace, if I remember. And then we have in, for example, polytheistic traditions. They're not really polytheistic, but in the outside they are, you know. Faith is such a remarkable idea. I feel it will be definitely a phase of human life where when we go beyond shape, that's all you can have. You have faith in space. You know, I am born at such a strange time. You know, so many times in these talks, in the middle of giving the talks, I've had this vision that I should have been born 400. I was born 400 years too soon. You know? But I thought about it, okay, let's say I was, you know. If I was, what's the advantage? What's the advantage of being born earlier than you had to? And the advantage is you have the intuition of the future in the past. So that's my advantage. I may not see when I wonder about the future, right? That means, I don't know, like fortune tellers are like, you know, they're not even thinking straight, right? They're not, they're not thinking straight. They're not even going about it efficiently, right? That means, imagine, like, you know, I could see if, like, you know, I've never, like, I'm not someone who, like, you know, provides psychic services because, you know, that's done by the divine, you know. To be honest, guys, I am a servant of the original world. That's who I am. When I say the servant of the original world, I mean I am like a pilot here. I am not a messenger. I am not someone specific. I'm a pilot. And a pilot means a being that has entered reality to direct the attention, either in the inner realms or the outer realms. In the outer realms, I don't have my piloting certification yet, but in the inner realms, you know, I've numerous flights, countless flights. You know, I think this is a good metaphor, right? Where our body is running and our mind is flying. And it's as if you use your physical lifetime to actually fly to the presence of reality. The presence of reality, dear viewers, surpasses all the conclusions our personalities can have on it ever. That's the cool thing about this world we're in. So anyways, we go on to the sixth name. The infuser of faith, the one who witnessed for himself that no one is God but him, and he witnessed for his believers that they are truthful in their belief that no one is God but him. So it's like the suggestion that there was this eternal, uncreated being that was perfect, and this being realized it's alone. So imagine an eternal, uncreated, absolute being. And this being, out of its love, it created a world where its creation could not be alone. You see, all those people ever in human history that have wanted to be a god, just they've had that egoic desire. They have not understood that this world is not an ideocentric reality. It is literally a symbiosis with a universal intelligence. And it's like realizing, just like we have the idea of, for example, I think they call this coherentism versus foundationalism. The idea is from one approach, we are just being like zooming in on ourselves and looking at our specific cause and effect and creating a world out of that and comparing it to the outer realms. You see, dear viewers, the more you go towards truth, the less the human being is the one that's moving things. The more you go away from truth, the human being feels like a god of a lesser dimensions. Do you understand? Like imagine there's a 2-dimension, like, just for the sake, okay? Let's say there's dimension 2, dimension 3, and dimension 4, just for example, right? And then these three dimensions, right? Imagine there's a being in dimension 3, and the being has a lifetime, and it chooses to act like a god to lesser dimensional beings. For me, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find my greater classroom in this world. And not in the sense of a classroom. For me, it's kind of like the next adventure. You know, sometimes a person may not be like a good person, a perfect person, a nice person, right? And once they realize that, that's when they can start being something else. Right? Because if you deny what you're doing, right? For example, I'm someone who's smoking cigarettes, and I'm denying, like a part of me is denying that this is bad for me, and I just keep doing it. Do you know? And I'm conscious of it, but it's as if there are complexities of even emotional attachments that are not even visible in the subconscious. This is why the idea of God is so powerful, because it's asking the administrator to administer what you, as in some sense, cannot. Okay? So anyways, I'll keep going with these names. Al-Mu'min. Oh no, I read this. The infuser of faith. The one who witnessed for himself that no one is God but him. And he witnessed for his believers that they are truthful in their belief that no one is God but him. Then we have Al-Muhaymin, the preserver of safety, the one who witnesses the saying and deeds of his creatures. That means, imagine you were a person, a villager back in the day, scared, didn't know what was going on, didn't know what to do, and then somebody comes and tells you, don't be afraid, little guy, in a world so big, right? There is someone who is watching over us. Do you understand what sort of inner strength religion created for our ancestors to endure the meaningless realities that so easily atheists today say, like, yo, they were delusioned old people, There's something more to this world than our eyes can promise us. Al-Aziz, the mighty one, the strong, the defeater who is not defeated. Think of as if you were a warrior back in the day, okay? And so you were in battle and you didn't know what to do. You didn't have any, it's like you're just freaking out. You were just there in a lineup, And so for a moment you just make a prayer. It's as if, help me get through this. And then a strength comes out of nowhere. No one gets through this world alone. And if they do, they stop being themselves. They're not a self. That means if I'll give you an example. For example, imagine Earth is like a cubicle office space, and then in the morning all the employees are going through the lobby of the skyscraper or whatever, right? And they go through the lobby, right? And they go and sit in their cubicles, right? And in the elevator they see the owner of the company, right? And then the owner of the company comes down and checks the cubicles of different people, checks and sees what the management is doing. And it's kind of like God watching over the totality of all that it is. Do you understand? From man's position, there is a God. From God's position, it's only God. Do you see? That's why it's inconceivable to the creation. That means truth is experiencing truth in a way where the shadow of the light or the simulation cannot. But that's part of it, right? That means it's like that now. It's like we're an unknown energy, right? That right now is playing this part. It's like we have to play the human role, and some energies playing the planet role, and some energies playing the logos role. And it's all about roles and maintaining and positioning. And to be honest, it's like the invisible is building something out of the visible. That's the power of the divine, I find. It's movement before there is information for reason to even exist. Al-Jabbar, the omnipotent one, the one that nothing happens in his dominion except that which he willed. This is such a profound, this attribute and name of God is very profound. Let me tell you why. When I started giving these Mr.Within talks, just as a kid, I've had this hobby where I go and open books randomly. My father had a bookshelf. Okay, to continue. So I remember, this was after like a couple years I'd given the Mr.Within talks, and there was this week of my life where I was feeling very pure. I was feeling a sort of divine energetic presence about the days, right? And so I remember I just felt this moment where I opened the holy book, the Quran, and in that book there was there was a passage that was so next level to me, and it was like, I might not be doing it justice and saying it properly here, so I apologize for that, but the idea of it was as if like, who do you think you are trying to save God's creation when God with an instant can in some sense wipe civilizations and make them rise, right? So the idea was, oh, you soul who has entered the world, even though you have faith in God and may feel like a servant of God, but the true work of God is God's work. Do you understand? Man cannot do God's work, but man is part of God's work in some sense. So what that means is that there is an authorization to everything. The fact that I'm existing right now in this moment, right? Like in an instant, like just there's so many factors to life that like my heart could just stop, or something like something could happen and I could just stop existing. So to me, there is this sacredness that there is still a necessity for my existence if I am existing. Now the path is to in some sense understand what is that necessity. Do you understand? So it's kind of like looking at one moment in time and closing your eyes and trying to like creating this geometrical branches from that singular moment and seeing all the different probabilities and ways the future can arise. And then realizing, regardless of how capable you are of in some sense probabilizing the future in your inner realms, the authority that moves the inner realms. That means we think behind our eyes we are kind of like God when it comes to our ability to imagine anything, but in reality the context is the authorization of another. So what it means is man is made. Man's truth emerged in the middle of in the center of God's truth. From the center of God's truth. Anyways, the 10th name, Al-Mutakabir. The Mutakabir. Al-Mutakabir. The dominant one. The one who is clear from attributes of the creatures and from resembling them. Do you understand? That means it's like let's think of, like, for example, wolves, right? The alpha male is the stronger one, right? So we think of like gorillas. The 800-pound gorilla is like the alpha, right? But now, what would be the alpha to the most alphas all over the planet? And it's one that does not have the limitations of a creature. That means imagine a disembodied alpha. A disembodied alpha being. What that means is they're just commands at that point. Divine commands. Do you know, it's like a soul, you know, incarnated so many lives. It's like, what am I doing here? Buddha, help me out. You know, and the Buddha was like, yo, man, I'm already enlightened. You got to help yourself out. You know? I'm kidding. The Buddha was awesome. You know, sometimes a part of me wished that, you know, I could see like all the prophets of all religions reanimate and sit at a table and have a discussion, and that discussion broadcasted all over the planet. How awesome would that be? Right? Even though impossible, but awesome. There's, you know, somebody can enjoy something impossible, believe it or not. So this is the interesting idea that beyond the alpha ego or the beta ego is the divine authority. God is the king, but it's not the conceivable king. It's the inconceivable king of all kings. Do you understand that even if you are the most powerful being on this earth listening to me, in whatever dimension, right? You could be the most powerful physical being. You could be the most powerful intellectual being. You could be the most powerful visionary being. You could be the most powerful industrial being, whatever. In whatever classification, if you do not realize, if you think you are the epitome of power, it's like, oh my God, it's like lost soul problems. It's like a soul lost in a mall. You know, anytime a soul, a consciousness desires an ultimate power and thinks it is that power, it's like a lost soul, like a lost kid in a mall who's eventually gonna go to the security counter and they're gonna call the kid's mom, right? They're gonna call the kid's father, right? That's you know, it's something like in those lines, right? Because there are, I don't know how to say it, but it's like, even though we exist alone, we're not designed to experience the manifestation alone. Do you understand? Like, I understand I exist alone, and that's nobody's business, and that's just my business to some degree, right? But at the same time, then there is like, but I am not experiencing my existence alone. Right? That means even if I was on an island, I would still not be experiencing my existence alone. Not just because of animals or whatever, but because there's the world, there's the sun, there's the sky, there's the clouds, there's variables of movement. Do you understand? That means like if I would, like, I don't know, but I sometimes I thought about it. It's like, what would I do if I was stranded on an island, right? And I would be like, yo, I would probably start creating a language. I would start making when the clouds moved a certain way, it would be as if the clouds are speaking to me, right? That means I would shift from a context of communication. The idea is if you're in a dehumanized environment, then your survival requires you to also become dehumanized, unfortunately, right? If you want to endure in that environment long term. But anyways, I'll continue, guys. The idea was al-mutakabir, the dominant one. What that means is truth is the ultimate alpha. The honest people around you are the ultimate alpha males. The rest are just acting in some sort of past, you know. So look at how the human intelligence works. You're a human being. Forget just the context of religion or, you know, a secular or whatever. Just think of it as if you're a human being. What's going on? Every day you wake up, sequences of actions, sequences of decisions. During those sequences of decisions, personas are present for each decision or behind each decision. So what that means is you're being multiple people to yourself, even though you're existing as one person in front of your eyes. Behind your eyes, you're experiencing multiple ways of your own mind throughout the day, right? So these ways end up becoming memories. Sometimes these memories are incomplete. So imagine you were a young kid and you wanted to play, you were playing chess with your father and you were about to checkmate your father, and your father like gets angry and in some sense slams the chessboard and says, this is a stupid game. you know. And imagine years later, this kid is playing chess with his own son. He's become a father himself, and his son is about to beat him in chess, and he suddenly slams. He doesn't know why, but he just slams like the chessboard, right? And why? Because in his youth, his memory identified with an incomplete moment. Because the ego is trying to be perfect all the time, it cares for imperfections way more than perfections. So what that means is if somebody comes and talks to us about our imperfections, we will be way more interested than somebody come and treating us as perfect. Anyways, to continue, Al-Khaliq, the creator, the one who brings everything from non-existence to existence. That means human beings were like, yo, how are women giving birth to children? They're like, God's command, God's will, God created this. Do you understand what sort of closure the idea of God was for a bunch of creatures freaking out in the middle of nowhere? Like, it was incredible closure. We have Al-Bari, the evolver, the maker, the creator who has the power to turn the entities. So we're here thinking that evolution is just the creature's intelligence. And we're like, yo, how did our ancestors survive and get by? And it's kind of like the will of nature is God's will, God's command. Al-Musawwir, the flawless shaper, the one who forms his creatures in different pictures. Wow. That means the greatest artist is God. If you're an artist, you know, and you know, you have, you know, your egos competing with other artists. Let's say right now 2 artists are like trying to destroy each other's careers. I'm like, guys, you 2 are nothing compared to, you know, the you know, whoever made this whole artwork, you know. It's a beautiful idea, you know. The mind is here not to lock itself down in the past, but to use the past as firewood for the future's great will, right? Al-Ghafar, the great forgiver, the one who forgives the sins of his slaves time and time again. So this idea of a slave in modern times, there's such a heavy connotation to that word that we don't even try to think about ideas from multiple angles anymore. We're just emotionally interpreting ideas and locking them down and thinking the idea should be ignored, right? So when you think of the concept of a slave, let's just look at it from a psychologist's point of view and also a mystical point of view, and to be like, wait a minute, let's not treat the slave as an embodiment, as a body, but let's say that consciousness is enslaved to form. What this means is your intelligence is conditional to your reality. So when it says Al-Ghafir, the great forgiver, forgiveness means that someone has done wrong, and when they have understood they have done wrong and have chosen a different solar path, then in some sense it's like, okay, you are seeing something different, so you won't have the same result. Do you see? You know, sometimes I find it very, you know, it kind of breaks my heart, right? Because when you see good and bad people, right? When you see like people like let's say evil actions, I sometimes think, is it the person that's evil, or is it the way the person has been programmed by the type of life they've had that's making them evil, right? So it's kind of like, are they programmed to be evil, or is the person evil from the beginning, right? And I think because good and evil entities dislike loneliness, their souls are rendered to be good. They're just, the nature of this world is rendering good. Why? Because in goodness, there's more possibility and awareness of complexity. In evil, they just freaking destroy shit, right? That's it. What is evil doing that is contributing to reality? If we were locked in a utopia that was like so blind to itself, that wasn't advancing, and then you'd be like, okay, does evil make sense? You're like, sure, wake up the giant, you know. But at the same time, it's not in our authority. This was the biggest realization I had in 2023 that made me comprehend. I had an experience this year that made me realize that my fear was not allowing me to have my fear of myself was creating a desire that was surpassing the desire to know what I truly am, or to know what I am truly in the presence of. I may not be able to comprehend the mysteries of the human existence, but it's as if I'm a creature that can communicate, and the species kindly requests for hilariously divine customer service. We are like customers and consumers of our reality, right? And it's as if God created the reality. So in some sense, like a person connecting, how can I tell you, you know, it's so bizarre, because in the secular culture, we fear death, and wisdom comes from death. In, what do you call it, religious culture, they fear God more than they fear death. Do you understand? Religious people fear God way more than they fear death. But secular people fear death like it's God. So this might sound bizarre, but it's as if emptiness and fullness are fighting for the meaning of reality in our minds. Because you know why they say faith? Because what can you do with the inconceivable? You cannot believe it because you can't see it to believe it. You can't see anything to believe. There's no content. So when something is there that has no content, but it's there, this is where the idea of inconceivable faith means the being has reached a point in its lifetime, in its life, where it is realizing that physical moments also have a non-physical significance. That means you have not just been an object here. There's something else here. Al-Kahar, the all-prevailing one, the dominant, the one who has the perfect power and is not unable over anything. What that means is, if we were to fathom a being that has ability everywhere in reality, it is a being that most likely has positioned reality. Do you understand? It's as if like we've created the room that we've suddenly forgotten we've created, we've entered. Al-Wahhab, the supreme bestower, the one who is generous in giving plenty without any return. He is everything that benefits, whether halal or haram. That means if we didn't create ourselves, we don't know what is best for us, right? So if we didn't create the world, we may not know what's best for the world. I might not know, like, if an advanced civilization is what the world needs. The world might just want to be a garden, right? The world might not care for an advanced civilization. The world might be like, okay, human beings were like, you know, they weren't up to par, and it's like, let's have grasslands all over the planet again. I mean, like, sure, right? But at the same time, if man appreciates his position and how his attention is being his access to the divine, do you understand? It's as if it's not like you have a phone you can call God. It's like your consciousness is the in-call phone call with God. That's when everything throughout the day suddenly becomes divine, right? A bird flies over, like suddenly, let's say you're giving a talk and a bird flies in front of you, and you look at the direction of the bird and you suddenly see something, an event taking place. You understand? It's like the world is alive, the world communicates, but it communicates based on the capacity of the communication that can be received. So that means if the human being has a desire, let's check this out, right? Instead of human beings trying not to be religious and then having desires, religious people are like, okay, if you have desires, at least ask your desire from the creator, from the one who created everything that you're desiring. Ar-Razaq, the total provider, the sustainer, the provider. Al-Fatah, the supreme solver, the opener, the revealer, the judge, the one who opens for his slaves the closed worldly and religious matters. This means God is your only guru if you're a monotheist. Okay? The inconceivable presence of the moment, how the moment is being, is it. So this means the supreme solver. This is an incredible one, because this is where this is how I came to recently in 2023. The concept of God has the context of God has found a different experiential fascination for me. It's because I realize when we pursue the intellectual, when we try to solve the world like an intellectual problem, we reach a certain position where just like just like after the 4 chess moves, there's like so many, like billions of so many different types of variations of moves that can be made. After some point in the intellectual pursuit, one reaches a point where they notice their limitations existentially, but they also notice the limitless experientially. So when you notice the limitless experientially, you reach the state where you're like, okay, so I can have infinite viewpoints, which is the right view. So think of it as if I'm someone who's talked about life from so many different viewpoints, where at some point I'm like, okay, which one is it then, right? And I've reached this point, right, where I've realized I cannot decide out of infinite options. So the intellect has met infinity, an infinite dead end, a dead end called infinity. Okay, so when you come to infinite possibility of reality, that is when you realize the limitations of self are the beginning awareness point of the divine. So once you see, it's like there's physics, and then there's the word meta, which means after, and then there's after physics, metaphysics. And so once you've noticed you're existing as a physical being, the next question is, how are you psychologically, dualistically experiencing your existence? How are you knowing that you are experiencing your existence? And how are you knowing that you can instantaneously move your existence? These are not conceptual and energetic actions. What that means is there's ways that we're happening that have nothing to do with thought. I'll call it intuition, instinct, or I shouldn't say instinct, it's more like intuition. An unknown intuition, an unknown rhythm. Al-Alim, the all-knowing, the knowledgeable, the one nothing is absent from his knowledge. That means, imagine the one who authored manifestation. The all-knowing one means a state of being, an inconceivable state of being is the epitome of knowledge. So good luck, for the intellectual pursuit. My way is the educational system has to just shift its context, make a few smart chess moves, bring its knights and bishops into the center, connect its rooks, castle its king. Al-Qabid, the restricting one, the constrictor, the withholder, the one who constricts the sustenance by his wisdom and expands and widens it with his generosity and mercy. That means the restricting one, it's as if it's so bizarre, right? It's like an artist. Okay, it's like an inventor this is just some parallel philosophical metaphor I'm seeing right now, but it's like an inventor builds an android, okay, in its own image, okay, and so the android can't see the inventor, but the android, if it has faith in what's within it, it can abide by the program by a way where it's designed to come into contact with the inventor. Right, so the inventor was smart enough to create an android, but also smart enough to create a way for the android to notice it or to interact with it. So that means, anybody who has anything right now in the world, I want you to take a moment and just realize, whether you're secular, religious, if you're secular, appreciate just the world force. And if you're religious, appreciate the divine force. How what you have is what has been authorized. This might be a bizarre thing, but it's like we might be born into existence, but our psychologies are authorized into existence, believe it or not. Al-Basit, the extender, the enlarger, the one who constricts the sustenance by his wisdom and expands and widens it with his generosity and mercy. Right? Al-Khafid, the reducer, the abaser, the one who lowers whoever he willed by his destruction and raises whoever he willed by his endowment. That means we can't promote ourselves from in the monotheistic vision. But we can be promoted if it is required, if it is necessary, and if it is destined. Ar-Rafi, the elevating one, the exalter, the elevator, the one who lowers whoever he willed by his destruction and raises whoever he willed by his endowment. And guys, think about just the prophets of religions and how thousands of years after their lives they're still being remembered. That's literally, the elevating one. There was this story I remember, and the story was of these two ancient Greek brothers, right? One of them went and was very popular at the time, was outspoken, was like a very, had written so many different books, right? Many books. And then there was another brother who had just written one book. And in the future, that guy who had written 200 books and was popular and famous and everything, right? That guy's books were forgotten and the one brother's book was remembered. And it was so bizarre. That means it's like we don't choose how far our efforts go. You know, I believe it or not, like I have a desire. You know, I have this vision, this sort of thing. Like once I got a vision, this YouTube channel hits 4.2 million. But then I realized it's the world, though. It's like, how limited would I be if I just try to comprehend a universal event just personally? You know, like, so the elevation. It is also an elevation beyond our free will is beyond our will. So the beyond elevates. The elevator even goes up, right? So Al-Mu'izz, the honor, the bestower. He gives esteem to whoever he willed. Hence there is no one to degrade him. And he degrades whoever he willed. Hence there is no one to give him esteem. Al-Muzil, the abaser, the dishonor, the humiliator. He gives esteem to whoever he willed. Hence there is no one. Hence there's no one to give him esteem. Hence there's no one to degrade him, and he degrades whoever he willed. Hence there's no one to give him esteem. So I'll read it again. The dishonor, the humiliator. He gives esteem to whoever he willed. Hence there is no one to degrade him, and he degrades whoever he willed. Hence there is no one to give him esteem. As-Sami, the all-hearer, the hearer, the one who hears all things that are heard by his eternal hearing, without an ear, instrument, or organ. Al-Basir, the all-seeing, the all-noticing, the one who sees all things that are seen by his eternal seeing without a pupil or any other instrument. Hakim, Al-Hakim, the imperial judge. The judge, he is the ruler, and his judgment is his word. Wow. You know, this just opened my mind to how language is a form of judgment. Al-Adl, the embodiment of justice. The just, the one who is entitled to do what he does. That means the only free being in reality is the one who created all being from the theological lens. Al-Latif, the knower of subtleties. Latif, I think in Farsi the word also means like soft. The knower of subtleties, the subtle one, the gracious one, the one who is kind to his slaves and endows upon them. This next one is incredible. Al-Khabir, the all-aware one, the one who knows the truth of things. It's like, imagine a pigment of a paint on a painted canvas wants to know like why the brush moved. Only the artist knows its artwork, the truth behind its artwork. Al-Halim, the clement one. Clement means mild, evidently. The clement one. The forbearing, the one who delays the punishment for those who deserve it, and then he might forgive them. Al-Azim, the magnificent one, the great one, the mighty, the one deserving the attributes of exaltment, glory, extolment, and purity from all imperfection. I don't know what it is, guys, about the word greatness, where it's like every time I hear it, it's as if I feel like the future generations are watching all of us. The unborn future generations. I have this thing where I say that the future is inconceivable. If in future we're a collective being, the future self of our species could be parallel with the idea of how everything returns to God. So this means everything can return to God while man is alive, not when man dies. You see, there's a reason Meister Eckhart, he has this quote where, let me see if I can find it. Meister Eckhart, this mystic from Christian mystic from 1,000 years ago, he says God expects but one thing of you, and that is you should come out of yourself, insofar as you are a created being made as a created being made, and let God be God in you. That's what I wanted to say. That's the magnificence of the one. Al-Ghafur, the great forgiver, the all-forgiving, the one who forgives a lot. Ash-Shakur, the acknowledging one, the grateful, the appreciative, the one who gives a lot of reward for a little. Like, interesting about the idea of God being seen as the archetype of a father, right? Because a father may punish, for example, his son, right? But he doesn't want to destroy his son. You understand? He wants to correct his son, right? Just the previous one, I'm just going to read it completely. Just read it again. The acknowledging one, the grateful, the appreciative, the one who gives a lot of reward for a little obedience. Ali, the sublime one, the most high, the one who is clear from the attributes of the creatures. Guys, if there is something present in this world that has attributes beyond a creature, how can a creature that has attributes use technologies based on its attributes to discover something beyond that its attribute? Do you see why faith is like a, it's like the next door? Al-Kabir, the great one, the most great, the one who is greater than everything in status. That means most human beings, we have like three types of status, right? We have a status to ourselves, right? We have a status to others, and then we have a status in how we are as a being in the world, actually, completely, right? And our emotions are really just being limited to our body. Just imagine in the future, right? Children, they stop being evil and they're like, why? How did the future generations pull off a peaceful reality? And some genius was like, yo, we connected their minds. So when one evil person did everything, everybody felt it. So because they emotionally felt each other's actions, everybody, the emotions of the good people overweighed the evil ones. That means it was like the evil people got to experience all the blessings that the good people are experiencing, right? And then in some sense, in a collective position of mind, the limitation. Oh my God. Al-Kabir.
Break the bubbles and we'll get
Al-Hafiz, the guarding one, the preserver, the protector, the one who protects whatever and whoever he will to protect. Guys, there's a story in my family that I can relate to this. My grandfather's father, my grandmother's father, when he was a young boy, his father at his village gives him, in some sense, a letter and says, go on horseback alone, ride for 2 days and go to your uncle's village and give him this letter and start living with them. You'll have more opportunities in that village. So, and keep in mind, they were religious people. So my grandmother's father, when he's this young kid, like think as if 14, something in that age, right? He's going on horse alone at night for 2 days, riding to get to like wherever the destination is, right? And he finds himself at this situation where there's snow and he's, I don't know, stepped down to do something, right? And he says, this is the story my grandmother was saying to like me and my cousins and everyone, right? And she was saying her grandfather suddenly finds himself in this like forest area taking a break off the horse, and he looks to his side and there's snow everywhere and he sees this wolf staring at him. Okay? And that moment he just stops, he sees the wolf, and he just shouts God's name at this wolf. Imagine a 14-year-old kid in a forest at night and there's a wolf staring at you. So this kid just shouts God's name repeatedly. And my grandmother said the wolf froze. And he just got on his horse and got out of there. Al-Hafiz. Meaning, the greatest guardian of the world is its creator. You know, I will not physically be here in the future. My voice may be. And the only thing that can watch over the species immortally to endlessly till the end of time, the species is attempting an immortal victory of a natural organism in a world way bigger than its designed comprehension. The advanced civilization is God's greatness in the visible realm. If you're secular, the advanced civilization is a glowing star. If you're religious, same thing. It's God's glow. Because before we named ourselves, what was the movement of the universal sector? What greatness is holding everything? Just the bizarre geometry of plants creating a possibility of an atmosphere for there to be creatures that breathed in that atmosphere and then flew beyond that atmosphere. This is not normal. Nothing of this world is, and that's the clue to its greatness. It's beyond man's mind. So till the end of time, truth will never be normal. Because normality is the limitation. It's just what it's the mask that groups of people wear. Behavioral masks. Al-Mukit, the sustaining one, the maintainer, the guardian, the feeder, the one who has the power. Al-Hasib, the reckoning one, the reckoner, the one who gives the satisfaction. Al-Jalil, the majestic one, the sublime one, the beneficent, the one who is attributed with the greatness and power and glory of status. Al-Karim, the bountiful one, the generous one, the gracious, the one who is attributed with greatness of power and glory of status. Al-Rakib, the watchful one, the watcher, the one that nothing is absent from him. Hence its meaning is related to the attribute of knowledge. That means it's kind of like if you know God, you are knowing the knower of everything. If humanity in the future is a timeless, inconceivable collectivity, the prophets can also be seen as time travelers. Beings that had divine authority beyond time even. Had been given divine authorization beyond time. Al-Mujib, the responding one, the responsive, the hearkener, the one who answers the one in need if he asks him, and rescues the yearner if he calls upon him. Al-Wasi, the all-pervading one, the vast, the all-embracing, the knowledgeable. Al-Hakim, the wise one, the wise, the judge of judges, the one who is correct in his doings. That means divine law is beyond human law. Al-Wudud, Al-Wudud, the loving one, the one who loves his believing slaves and his believing slaves love him. His love to his slaves is his will to be merciful to them and praise them. So guys, slave, think of it as consciousness bound to its conditional reality. Al-Majid, the glorious one, the most glorious one, the one who is perfect power, high status, compassion, generosity, and kindness. Al-Baith, the infuser of new life, the resurrector, the raiser from death, the one who resurrects his slaves after death for reward and or punishment. Ash-Shahid, the all-observing witness, the one who nothing is absent from him. Al-Haq, the embodiment of truth, the one who truly exists. Al-Wakil, the universal trustee, the one who gives the satisfaction and is relied upon. That means maybe human beings cannot be trusted, but the author that moves the pen of every thought that has ever come into our view. If you want to trust your world, you must trust its causal position, but its causal position is on cause. So you must have faith in the unknown way that all your knowledge is being. Al-Qawi, the strong one, the most strong, the one with complete power. Al-Mateen, the firm one, the one with extreme power which is uninterrupted and he does not get tired. Al-Mateen, he does the one who does not get tired. Why do we get tired? An answer, a very bizarre theological answer could be that the soul gets tired of its sins. If you are very tired, I'm not talking about physically, I'm talking about the enthusiasm for this unknown world we're all in. The one with extreme power which is uninterrupted and he does not get tired. Do you know how beautiful that is? That means like somebody could come and interrupt me when I'm giving a talk, but what is the destiny of the moment cannot be interrupted. Do you understand what this means? It means it's a causal authority that is to itself uncaused, but to man a causal authority that cannot be affected by its effect. Man cannot become God, because if he became God, he would not exist. Do you see how the responsibility of an eternal? You're right now on this world responsible for your physical existence, and let's say for your free will, for your soul's journey. But to be responsible for the totality of manifestation and its destiny, that means the idea of God means the world already knows where it's going. Man is just there on the shoulder of this giant that is running to the GPS destination it knew before it existed. Al-Wali, the protecting associate, the protecting friend, the supporter. Al-Hamid, the sole laudable one, the praiseworthy, the praised one who deserves to be praised. Al-Muhsi, the all-enumerating one, the counter, the reckoner, the one who the count of things are known to him. That means you might hide something, you might lie, you might use deception, but you cannot deceive, like the artwork cannot deceive the artist. The artist is seeing it in ways the artwork doesn't even understand. Al-Mubdi, excuse me, Al-Muhsi. Oh no, I read that. Al-Mubdi, the originator. Al-Mubdi, the originator, the one who started the human being, that is, he created him. Al-Mu'id, the restorer, the reproducer, the one who brings back the creatures after death. What an incredible reality, imagine. Imagine an inventor creates an android, and the software of the android, the soul, is immortal, is eternal, right? But the android's body is, let's say, temporary. And so the android dies, and it thinks it's gonna die, but it suddenly sees its consciousness is already backed up on some server. So its consciousness suddenly comes back, and then the inventor creates another body and puts the same consciousness in it. Because what should one do with a soul that has been created? Do you understand? The beautiful magnificence of God, which is not comprehensible to human being, is that it is the manager. It is also the management of souls. And the way they have been managed is that their future has been decided before they were made. That's incredible management right there. It's not the only type of management, but it is a type of incredible management. Al-Muhi, the maintainer of life, the restorer, the giver of life, the one who took out a living human from semen that does not have a soul. He gives life by giving the souls back to the worn out bodies on the resurrection day, and he makes the hearts alive by the light of knowledge. He makes the hearts alive by the light of knowledge. That's the life of your presence before your personality. So meaning it gives you your universal memory. It gives you your divine memory. So it cannot die once it's experiencing itself as just software, the android. Once the android, it realizes it was never just the hardware, the software was moving the hardware. When something happens to the hardware, the software is alone. right? So the software has to be like, okay, my relationship, it's kind of bizarre. It's like if there is an afterlife, it's the implication that after this physical life, there is also the continuity of a non-physical one, which is an incredible idea. Socrates was famously known to say, when he was about to, he was sentenced to death, right, by drinking poison and whatnot. Socrates told his disciples, who were all like in tears and in shock that a great soul, a Mahatma, was leaving the realm, right? And so Socrates tells them, they ask him, Socrates, where are you going? And Socrates says something in the lines of like, I'm going to a place where there will either be no Socrates, or all the questions I've had in this life will be answered. That's the fascination of a life beyond life. Al-Momit, the inflictor of death, the creator of death, the destroyer, the one who renders the living dead. Death was created. Death was created. So meaning death is not death, death is a creation. And we have thought death means the absence of creation. Al-Momit, the inflictor of death, the creator of death, the destroyer, the one who renders the living dead. Al-Hayy, the eternally living one, the alive, the one attributed with a life that is unlike our life and is not that of a combination of soul, flesh, or blood. That is not of a combination of soul, flesh, or blood. That means the way the creator of the world is alive is beyond all the ways that soul, flesh, and body, soul, mind, and body are in some sense leading to meaning. What this means, truth knows what we will never, even though we are it. We are being in the presence of it. The eternally living one. That is like just alone one of the most beautiful sentences I've ever heard. The self-subsisting one. The one who remains and does not end. Imagine the beauty of endlessness. Imagine the beauty of an infinity.
Get ready. Flip those eggs. Top. Now take it down.
The one who remains. That means the one who is even watching over infinity. Al-Qayyum, the self-subsisting one, the one who remains and does not end. Sorry guys, I read that again. Al-Wajid, the pointing one, the perceiver. Al-Wajid, the pointing one, the perceiver, the finder, the rich who is never poor. Al-Wajid is richness. So what does that mean? You see, wealth is something that, sure, we have the notion that you create wealth, right? You build wealth, but it's also the case that you can find wealth, okay? And back in the day, their view on wealth was something more than you build wealth is you find treasure, you find wealth, okay? So, the pointing one, what is the greatest wealth? Is the greatest wealth physical wealth? No. The greatest wealth is to know what you are. That is the greatest wealth. Because you're satisfying a problem which is at the core of every other problem, which is the self. So, the perceiver, the finder, the rich who is never poor, means the one who knows its place in the world at the time that it's being. Do you understand? That means, this might sound strange to some people, but faith is a type of ultimate wealth. Because faith in the inconceivable means nothing conceivable can in some sense burden you. The pointing one. Al-Majid, the all-noble one. But this Majid is spelled a bit differently. M-A-A-J-I-D here. Al-Majid, the all-noble one, the glorious, he who is most glorious. Al-Wahid, the only one. The Wahad, the only one. The unique, the one without a partner. Al-Ahad, the sole one, the one. That means, some people thought Neo in the Matrix was the one. No, that's not the one. And I think in the movie Matrix, even Neo knew he wasn't the one. But anyways, As-Samad, the supreme provider. At the ending of the third film, it's kind of revealed. As-Samad, the supreme provider, the eternal, the independent, the master who is replied upon in matters and reverted to in one's needs. The supreme provider. That means the biggest resource that everybody needs. I don't want to say like you need to go and jump into an ideological system, but you need to look at this world and ask yourself, is there something more than just us here? And what are ways that we interact with that something more? As-Samad, the supreme provider, the eternal, the independent. I read that. Al-Qadir, the omnipotent one. The able, the capable, the one attributed with power. Al-Muqtadir, the all-authoritative one, the powerful, the dominant, the one with the perfect power that nothing is withheld from him. Al-Muqadim, the expediting one, the expediter, the promoter, the one who puts things in their right places. He makes ahead what he wills and delays what he wills. Al-Muakhir, the delayer, the retarder, the one who puts things in the right places. He makes ahead what he wills and delays what he wills. What this means is that the pace of progress is in the will of the creative force. Al-Awal, the very first. The first, the one whose existence is without a beginning. Al-Akhir, the infinite last one. The last, the one whose existence is without an end. So check this out. The beginning, which was God, which has no beginning and ending, and the ending, which is God, which has no beginning or ending, is the same. So this means that the concept of a beginning and ending is only how it's appearing through the journey. Do you understand? Eternity is going through a round circle of a temporary journey back to an eternal point. The infinite last one. Wow. Al-Zahir, the perceptible, the manifest, the one that nothing is above him and nothing is underneath him. And hence he exists without a place. He, the exalted, his existence is obvious by proofs, and he's clear from the delusions and attributes of bodies. Guys, here it says he exists without a place. That means the original state is not a location. That means a location did not create. We're not in a location right now. Potential from, an experience internally. Al-Batin, the imperceptible, the hidden, the one that nothing is above him and nothing. Oh no, I read that. Al-Wali, the holder of supreme authority, the governor, the one who owns things and manages them. You know, God is a way of like a sort of transcendental union point, right? I mean, I think about sometimes like, imagine the leaders of nations were all religious. They would in some sense probably have it all living in a sort of divine nation, right? Like a divine union nation. Of a divine union of a nation, you know. Al-Mutali, the extremely exalted one, the most exalted, the high exalted, the one who is clear from the attributes of the creation. Al-Bar, the fountainhead of truth, the source of all goodness, the righteous, the one who is kind to his creatures, who covered them with his sustenance and specified whoever he willed among them by his support, protection, and special mercy. See, that's the coolest thing, that there is kindness. You see, all this supernatural stuff was somehow managed to touch upon the notion of a universal love or a oneness context of being, right? Al-Tawwab, the ever acceptor of repentance, the relenting, the one who grants repentance to whoever he willed among his creatures and accepts his repentance. Al-Muntaqim, the retaliator. Al-Muntaqim, the retaliator. The avenger, the one who victoriously prevails over his enemies and punishes them for their sins. It may mean the one who destroys them. What does this mean? Retaliation usually is found in different contexts, but usually is found in the context of justice. For example, you look at Che Guevara's life, you look at like the French Revolution, you know, you're seeing a force in the nature of the human beings of a source starting from a decency position, in some sense retaliating. Do you know what I'm saying? That means whether you're religious or non-religious, all human beings have this feeling that it's like, do you know, it's kind of cool being a member of a species, and we want to keep the species around, even though we all have different programmings, different cultural programmings, and ideological programmings. And repentance is key, guys, because, you know, you might be a secular person, you'll be like, repentance? Who am I repenting to? It's like, I don't have time to repent to fiction. But I'll tell you this, repentance means you've noticed a dead end, and you stop and you try to look from your heart, not from your mind, from your brain. When you look from your brain, you're thinking of what you don't have. When you look from your heart, you're looking from a place where it's as if you have, and you're looking what else can have. God's greatness is not just in the outer realms. Al-Afa, the supreme pardoner, the forgiver, the one with wide forgiveness. Al-Ra'uf, the benign one, the compassionate, the one with extreme mercy. The mercy of Allah is His will to endow upon whoever His willed among His creatures. Do you understand the power of compassion? Compassion is not destroying, but is like, okay, if I don't destroy things, all right, values remain. Now, what can happen with these values remain? Creative endeavors, like a human being is literally like, a universal, is like a project managed by the whole world, okay? But also by itself. So it's as if you're a project manager of your existence, but also the whole world is also managing how you're being one of its projects. This might be a sentence that has never been ushered before, or maybe it has, but it's like, sometimes I have this feeling, like from a theological lens, that it's like, are we God's project, you know? Or the projection of the truth, which is in some sense why we feel simulated. Malikul Mulk, the eternal possessor of sovereignty, the one who controls the dominion and gives dominion to whoever he willed. Zul Jalali wal Ikram, the possessor of majesty and honor, the Lord of majesty and bounty, the one who deserves to be exalted and not denied. That means honesty pays off. Al-Muqsid, the just one, the equitable, the one who is just in his judgment. I mean, think about, like, you're someone who believes in God, and you're like judging two people have come to you and you're like, yo, render justice, you know, and you're in that moment being like, okay, but I am not the real judge. And it's as if you, even though people think you are the judge, you look at them and you're like, no, I am not the judge. The judge can only be someone who can see in your hearts. And human beings, like the human archetype, cannot see like in someone else's heart. Only God can, from a theological lens context. Al-Jami, the assembler of scattered creations, the one who gathers the creatures on a day that there is no doubt about. That is the day of judgment. Al-Qani, the self-sufficient one. And guys, I don't know if you know this, but the idea of the day of judgment and the apocalypse is such a next level idea, because that's when everybody, I think even everybody who's dead also like animates, because the soul doesn't die. Al-Qani, the self-sufficient one, the one who does not need the creation. Al-Muqni, the bestower of sufficiency, the enricher, the one who satisfies the necessities of the creatures. Al-Mani, the preventer, the withholder. The withholder. Which is another way of saying God is the unknown. Because the unknown is preventing us from knowing things differently, because we haven't cared to wonder about the unknown, because we thought our knowledge was like a multiple choice and we had to just choose one. Al-Dar, the distresser, the one who makes harm reach to whoever he willed and benefit to whoever he willed. Which means just like justice, universal justice, I find. Al-Nafi, the bestower of benefits, the propitious, the one who makes harm reach to whoever he willed. Wait, no, sorry guys. Okay, here it says it's the same thing as the one above. So Al-Dar, the distresser, the one who makes harm reach to whoever he willed and benefit to whoever he willed. And Nafi, the bestower of benefits, the propitious, the one who makes harm reach to whoever he willed and benefit to whoever he willed. And Nur, the prime light, the one who guides. And what is light? Light is visibility of world, right? So guidance is like us realizing the world. Al-Hadi, the provider of guidance, the guide, the one whom with his guidance his believers were guided, and with his guidance the living beings have been guided to what is beneficial for them and protected from what is harmful to them. Al-Baqi, the ever-surviving one, the everlasting, the one that the state of non-existence is impossible for him. There was one before, I think I forgot to read. Al-Badi, the unique one, the incomparable, the one who created the creation and formed it without any preceding example. Al-Baqi, the ever-surviving one, the everlasting, the one that the state of non-existence is impossible for him. How incredible. Imagine a state where non-existence is impossible. Right now we're all freaking about the possibility of like the cultural mind of the 2023 species. Al-Waris, the eternal inheritor, the higher, the one whose existence remains. Al-Rashid, the guide to path of rectitude, the guide to the right path, the one who guides. So guys, in the Islamic tradition there's a saying which if I remember correctly, it's Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim, which is a prayer that is saying, God, guide me in the right path, right? Because if we didn't create this world, we may not know what the right path is, right? Like that could be an idea there. So the guide to the right path, the one who guides. As-Sabur, the extensively enduring one. The patient, the one who does not quickly punish the sinners. And that's the 99 names and attributes of God in the Islamic tradition. So the reason I shared this, and I said at the beginning this is theological, because I'm focusing on the idea of man made in the image of God, and because man is made in the image of God, in the attributes in some sense may be applied. So these are just archetypes, right? So what has gone on this planet is that it's like so many different human beings have arrived, and history has been how we have been archiving them. Philosophy has been how we have been archiving the psychological history of the species, right? You know, and in some sense, you know, the outer realm history of the species is like just history. Anyways, it's a wonder and a vision and a fascination for the ability of the created, for the ability of creation. So for me, I was like, okay, we're in this garden of existence. There's all these different flowers, right? You know, they're all flowers, they're like all humans, but we're all different kinds of flowers, different DNAs. So the idea is, one, to be present as part of the garden of existence, but the other is to see what have we been given, right? That means imagine like you've been given like a Ferrari, right? And you're just like you were born in that Ferrari, right? You know what I mean? So I'm saying like it's as if like you just know that, right? So it's as if instead of Ferrari, imagine it's a body. You've been just born in a body and you just know this, right? But if you experience how the nature of your presence is your whole moment rather than just a little part of what's in it you're identifying, then reality has a different glow, has a different feeling. And so the idea is, you know, an advanced civilization requires advanced beings, and advanced beings require to acknowledge the most advanced state. Anyways, thank you for listening. I hope this episode was interesting. Share, subscribe, comment, like, join, and comment below, you know, on what you think a body can do with a soul. I mean, there was so much more to say, to be honest, about this. But anyways, you know, I'll end the talk here, and maybe in the future I'll create a part 2 to this. But what can a body do with a soul? Or maybe I'll create a second part 2 to this called What Can a Soul Do with a Body? And I'll acknowledge some of the points that I wanted to talk about here, there, right? So here, let me make a note of this. In the future, part 2 to this episode will be recorded, titled What Can a Soul Do with a Body? So anyways, thank you for listening. Rise, mankind, rise. Namaste.